February 10th, 1945, Bataan Island, Philippines. A Douglas C-47 transport descends through cloudy skies at 150 feet, landing gear down, flaps extended. Inside, 8 passengers prepare for what they believe is a routine landing at Clark Field. 2 Army nurses clutch their seats. The pilot, after 5 hours fighting brutal weather with a dead radio, spots a grass airstrip below and commits to landing before his fuel runs dry. On the ground, Japanese soldiers chamber rounds into their rifles. This isn't Clark Field. It's enemy territory. Those Americans are 60 seconds from capture. Behind the transport, First Lieutenant Louis Curdes lines up his P-51 Mustang, finger hovering over triggers controlling 650 caliber machine guns. He's tried everything. Radio calls met with static, wing rocking signals ignored, warning shots that change nothing. The transport pilot can't hear him, can't see him, or simply won't abort with fuel gauges reading empty. Curdes makes a calculation that defies every regulation in military aviation. He aims his guns not at the enemy below, but at American aircraft carrying American personnel. What he doesn't know, one of those nurses danced with him 3 nights ago in Lingayen. What he does know, in 15 seconds, everyone aboard becomes a prisoner of war. The statistics are nightmare fuel. By February 1945, American POW survival rates in Japanese captivity hover around 60%, compared to 97% in German camps. The 77 American nurses captured in the Philippines in 1942 endure starvation, disease, and systematic brutalization. Landing on that island means almost certain death for the women aboard. Curdes' thumb moves to the firing button. He's about to commit an act so unprecedented that it will either save 8 lives or end his career in a firing squad. Understanding this crisis requires understanding how catastrophically the Pacific War has shattered conventional combat rules. Since Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military has demonstrated a fighting philosophy that horrifies even veteran commanders: Bataan Death March, torture of captured airmen, the brutalization of medical personnel. By early 1945, American commanders face brutal reality. Prisoners who fall into Japanese hands rarely survive. The problem Lieutenant Curdes confronts is deceptively simple, but strategically impossible to solve. Transport aircraft fly constant missions across thousands of Philippine islands, but primitive navigation equipment, violent weather patterns, and chaotic geography create deadly hazards. The C-47 approaching Bataan isn't lost through incompetence. Weather over Manila Bay killed the pilot's radio and obscured all landmarks. After 5 hours, airborne with fuel running critical, spotting any airstrip looks like salvation. The military's attempted solutions have failed catastrophically. Fighter escorts can't accompany every transport. Radio beacons fail in storms. Recognition protocols break down when weather scatters formations. Most frustrating, American and Japanese forces occupy islands sometimes just miles apart, and from altitude, one grass strip looks identical to another. Expert consensus by February 1945 acknowledges grim reality. 5th Air Force documents show 17 transport aircraft lost after inadvertent landings on enemy territory. General George Kenney, commanding Allied air forces in the Southwest Pacific, has reviewed every protocol. Fighter pilots receive explicit orders: attempt radio contact, attempt visual signals, and if all fails, break off and report the loss. Under no circumstances fire on American aircraft. The legal implications are too catastrophic. The stakes extend beyond one airplane. Every captured aircraft provides intelligence. Every prisoner becomes propaganda. Every failed rescue undermines morale. The War Department knows families read newspapers about lost aircraft and captured nurses. They know the Japanese will parade American women through Manila as symbols of defeat. Curdes understands none of this strategic calculus. He's on combat patrol, searching for a downed section leader when he spots the C-47 with gear down, committed to an approach that ends with Japanese captivity in 90 seconds. The rules say break off and report. Never fire on friendly aircraft. Follow chain of command. But rules don't anticipate situations existing beyond any regulation scope. Louis Edward Curdes brings zero credentials to this crisis. Born November 2, 1919, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, to a schoolteacher mother and industrial development father, young Lou shows no particular aptitude for heroism. He's just another middle-class Midwest kid dreaming of designing aircraft, not flying them. His engineering studies at Purdue University seemed destined for a career calculating wing loads and stress factors. After nearly 3 years of coursework, with no pilot training and no military background, Curdes makes an impulsive decision. December 6, 1941, one day before Pearl Harbor, this 22-year-old college dropout walks into an Army recruiting office and volunteers for flight training. The Army accepts him not because of exceptional skill, but because they desperately need bodies. Standards drop. Training accelerates. Young men who might spend decades in civilian life find themselves in cockpits within months. By April 1943, Second Lieutenant Curdes arrives in North Africa with perhaps 200 flight hours, none in combat. His commanding officer sees another baby-faced replacement pilot who will probably be dead within a month. Then something extraordinary happens. April 29, 1943. His very first combat mission escorting bombers over Cap Bon. Curdes encounters German Messerschmitt Bf-109s. He should freeze. Instead, this uncredentialed engineering student kicks rudder, tracks a target through a 45-degree deflection, and blows it from the sky. Then does it again. And again. 3 kills on his first mission. The moment of insight arrives through pure instinct under fire. Curdes possesses a gift, processing 3-dimensional combat geometry while under attack. Most pilots think sequentially. Curdes thinks systematically. He sees angles, energy states, relative velocities not as separate calculations, but as integrated pictures. Engineering training manifesting as combat instinct. Within weeks, he's an ace. 5 kills confirmed. By August 1943, 7 German fighters and 1 Italian Machi C-2 destroyed. Then his luck ends. August 27, escorting bombers to Benevento, 50 German fighters swarm the formation. Curdes gets 2 more kills, but his P-38 Lightning takes hits. He crash lands near Salerno and becomes a prisoner. This should end everything. But when Italy surrenders in September 1943, sympathetic guards help prisoners escape before German transfer. Curdes spends 8 months sleeping in caves, scrounging food from partisans, working south through enemy lines. May 27, 1944, exactly 9 months after capture, he emerges from a goat pen and encounters British 8th Army advance units. Regulations are explicit. Escaped POWs cannot return to combat on the same front. If recaptured, the enemy will torture them for escape details. But Curdes transfers to a different theater, the Pacific. January 1945, Lieutenant Curdes arrives at Mangaldan Airfield, Philippines, assigned to 4th Fighter Squadron, 3rd Air Commando Group. He flies a P-51D Mustang named Bad Angel. He's 25. He's an ace with 9 confirmed kills. He's an escaped POW. He's flying combat again despite every reason to accept stateside duty. And on February 10, 1945, every experience of his improbable career crystallizes into one impossible decision. Curdes' mind processes the problem with engineer precision and fighter pilot urgency. The C-47 has committed. Gear down, flaps deployed, airspeed bleeding. Radio contact fails. Visual signals fail. He rocks wings, fires engine, pulls alongside. Nothing works. Either the crew doesn't understand, or they're too focused on landing to process external warnings. Japanese anti-aircraft guns open fire on the P-51, but not the transport. They want it intact for capture. Curdes fires warning shots ahead of the C-47's nose. The tracers mean nothing. The transport maintains approach, now 100 feet above the airstrip. His crude solution crystallizes from desperate realization. The only way to prevent landing is making landing physically impossible. Not warning the pilot, mechanically disabling the aircraft to force water ditching rather than enemy capture. Curdes lines up directly behind the transport at 20 yards. His gun sight centers on the right engine. 6 50 caliber machine guns deliver over 4,000 rounds per minute combined. But he's not destroying the aircraft. He's disabling it surgically. He squeezes trigger. Tracers converge on the engine nacelle. Metal fragments spray. The engine trails smoke, then flames. The propeller stops. Inside, the crew experiences absolute terror. An American fighter just attacked them. But the transport still descends toward the strip. One engine disabled isn't enough. Curdes slides left alongside the port side. Through windows, faces stare back in horror. This is the moment crossing from desperate improvisation into "that's illegal" territory. He's deliberately shooting down American aircraft carrying American personnel, including 2 women, forcing ocean crash landing. No pilot in American aviation history has done this. No regulation covers it. If they die, he faces court-martial for murder. He fires. The left engine disintegrates. Now powerless, the C-47 glides toward water 300 yards from the Japanese beach. Inside, 8 people brace for impact, not understanding the fighter shooting them down is saving their lives. The reaction is immediate. That's impossible. That's illegal. That pilot just murdered his own people. The C-47 hits water hard but survives. The hull holds. Crew and passengers scramble onto life rafts. Curdes circles overhead, drops a message. "For God's sake, keep away from shore. Japs there." Japanese soldiers fire from the beach. The rafts drift just beyond range. Curdes and his wingman strafe the beach repeatedly, keeping enemy pinned while survivors paddle away. When ammunition and fuel run critical, Curdes returns to Mangaldan knowing he's either saved 8 lives or destroyed his career. Bureaucratic machinery activates before his wheels touch runway. The C-47's Mayday reached 5th Air Force headquarters. Reports indicate American fighter shot down American transport. Radio operators confirm the aircraft. 317th Troop Carrier Group. Casualty reports unknown. General Kenny's staff prepares court-martial paperwork because regulations are absolutely clear. Shooting friendly aircraft constitutes the most serious violation outside treason. Curdes lands and walks into squadron operations where his commander demands explanation. The room erupts. A major from group headquarters demands immediate arrest. Intelligence officers try reconciling Curdes' report with radio intercepts. Nobody has confronted a situation where a pilot deliberately shot down his own side claiming salvation. The expert confrontation arrives with Colonel Malcolm Moore, commanding 3rd Air Commando Group. Moore has flown combat since Doolittle's 1942 Tokyo raid. He's seen every type of friendly fire, every pilot error. He's also responsible for discipline. Learning what Curdes did, his instinct is immediate court-martial. But Moore is also a pilot understanding split-second decisions. He clears the room and demands Curdes explain second by second. Curdes describes the navigation error, failed radio, ignored signals, warning shots. Watching the transport commit to landing were Japanese mobilized for capture. The calculation, 8 in captivity, or 8 in rafts with rescue chance. Moore asks The determining question: did you know women were aboard? Curdes answers honestly, "No, sir. I knew Americans. That's all." The room fills again. The rescue Catalina retrieved all 8 survivors. No serious injuries. The C-47 pilot confirms radio failure prevented receiving warnings. Navigation error in weather caused the crisis. He thought he was landing at friendly territory until shooting started. The crew recommends Curdes for commendation, not court-martial. This creates unprecedented bureaucratic chaos. Regulations say court-martial. Survivors say medal. Precedent is non-existent. Staff officers argue that regardless of outcome, Curdes violated orders and must face consequences. Others counter no regulation anticipated this scenario. Don't shoot friendly aircraft doesn't address preventing enemy capture. Word reaches General George Kenney, commanding Allied Air Forces Southwest Pacific. Kenney has reputation as maverick, valuing results over regulations. He approved devastating skip bombing tactics against Japanese shipping. He authorizes experimental weapons and aggressive risk-taking. Kenney reviews the file, reads survivor statements, examines Curdes' record: ace pilot, escaped POW, distinguished flying cross from Mediterranean combat. Then he makes his decision. Kenney approves not just exoneration, but commendation. He awards Curdes an Air Medal with oak leaf cluster to his distinguished flying cross. The citation reads, "For meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight on February 10, 1945. First Lieutenant Curdes displayed exceptional flying ability and sound judgment in a difficult situation, preventing enemy capture of American personnel and equipment." Kenney also authorizes something unprecedented. Curdes can paint an American flag on his aircraft nose alongside German, Italian, and Japanese flags. It's the only official recognition in American military history of friendly aircraft shoot down as legitimate combat victory. The room erupts again when Kenney's decision reaches Mangaldan. Some officers argue this sets terrible precedent. Others note Kenney hasn't authorized anything except recognizing one specific incident where quick thinking saved 8 lives. Before we see the final outcome, I need your help. Every video requires dozens of hours researching military archives and veteran testimonials. These stories of incredible bravery deserve proper telling. If you believe these forgotten heroes deserve remembering, subscribe to Last Words and hit that bell. 92% watching haven't subscribed yet. Join the community preserving these stories. Share this with someone who appreciates real heroism. Now let's see the final results. The testing data arrives from 8 grateful Americans who'd otherwise be dead or captured. The C-47 crew documents fuel emergency, navigation confusion, radio failure. Without Curdes' intervention, they'd have landed on Bataan, been immediately captured, likely executed. Japanese treatment of prisoners in early 1945 has deteriorated to summary execution rather than captivity. The 2 Army nurses provide the most powerful testimony. Both were rotating stateside after months in field hospitals. Both would have become POWs on an island where defenders had orders to fight to death. Both describe watching the P-51 shoot out engines, initially believing they were under attack by a rogue Japanese pilot and captured American fighter. Only after ditching did they realize the fighter saved them. When Curdes receives the passenger manifest that evening, he discovers one nurse is someone he'd taken dancing in Lingayen 3 nights earlier. The revelation staggers him. He'll spend that entire night replaying the engagement, calculating how close bullets came to killing someone he knew. Combat validation occurs over following weeks as forces prepare the final Manila assault. The 3rd Air Commando Group flies continuous missions. Every transport now carries updated intelligence about enemy islands. But navigation errors continue because weather and equipment limitations haven't changed. February 15th, 5 days after Curdes' shootdown, Another C-47 strays near Mindoro. This time, the escorting P-51 successfully guides it away using visual signals. Key difference: functioning radios allowed confirming danger before committing. The incident goes into records as successful navigation assist, but pilots understand the critical factor. Curdes bought them all reprieve by proving prevention of capture justifies extreme measures. Enemy reaction comes through captured documents when American forces secure Bataan in April 1945. Japanese defenders had watched the entire engagement. They'd prepared to capture the C-47, mobilized troops, then witnessed an American fighter destroy its own aircraft rather than allow capture. Psychological impact ripples through Japanese intelligence. If Americans will destroy their own to prevent capture, what other desperate measures will they authorize as war reaches its end? Lives saved extend beyond 8 people. The entire Pacific Transport Command benefits from updated procedures triggered by Curdes' engagement. Fighter escorts carry explicit instructions for preventing inadvertent landings. Transport pilots receive additional navigation training. Radio equipment gets prioritized maintenance. Air Transport Command calculates these changes prevent approximately 25 potential captures between March and August 1945. Curdes continues flying through war's final months. His next mission after the incident, he shoots down Japanese reconnaissance aircraft, bringing confirmed total to 9 Axis aircraft plus 1 American. The only pilot in history with that combination. He flies 57 Pacific missions before Japanese surrender in August 1945, accumulating over 300 combat hours. The validation that matters most comes in a December 1945 letter from the C-47's pilot. One line Curdes keeps in his wallet forever. My crew and I went home to our families because you had courage to do what no one else would do. We don't have words big enough to thank you. The decision Curdes made represents something profound about human judgment under pressure. He had no time consulting regulations, no opportunity requesting permission, no precedent guiding him. He calculated odds, accepted consequences, acted. That's real courage. If this moved you, click that like button now. Comments boost videos too. Tell me, could you make the decision Curdes made? Subscribe if you haven't. We're racing toward 1 million subscribers. Everyone helps keep these stories alive. Let's see what happened to the man who shot down his own aircraft to save it. General George Kenney writes in his memoirs, "Of all brave pilots I commanded in the Pacific, few demonstrated the moral courage of Louis Curdes. Any pilot can shoot down enemy aircraft. It takes a special man to shoot down his own aircraft to save lives, knowing that decision might end his career." The 8 saved maintain contact for decades. Annual reunions continue until age makes travel impossible. One nurse writes in 1978, "We were 23 and 25, with whole lives ahead. Lou gave us those lives back. Every birthday, every grandchild born, we owe it to a pilot who had courage to break every rule to do what was right." The incident appears in Air Force officer training as case study in judgment under pressure. The question posed to every future officer class: under what circumstances is a military officer authorized to deviate from explicit orders to achieve what they believe is right? Discussion always returns to Curdes' calculation that 8 lives in captivity justified 8 at risk in forced ditching. The P-51 Mustang Curdes flew, marked Bad Angel with victory flags from Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States, is scrapped in 1946 during massive demobilization. However, Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson maintains a P-51D painted to match Curdes' aircraft, complete with unique victory markings no other American pilot achieved. The humble hero emerges clearly in years after service. Curdes continues in the Air Force, participating in Berlin Airlift 1948 to 1949, retiring in 1963 as lieutenant colonel after 22 years. He never seeks publicity for the incident. When reporters request interviews, he declines or redirects attention to the 8 who survived. In a rare 1987 interview, he says simply, "I was a fighter pilot doing my job. The job was protecting American lives. That day, protecting them meant shooting them down. I'd do it again." His wife Svetlana, married April 1946, tells family Lou rarely discussed combat. The nightmares plaguing him centered not on aircraft destroyed or enemies killed, but replaying moments after shooting out the C-47's engines, seconds of uncertainty before water impact, wondering if he'd murdered 8 Americans. Louis Edward Curdes dies February 5, 1995, at 75 in Fort Wayne, almost exactly 50 years after shooting down the C-47. His obituary runs 4 paragraphs without mentioning the incident. 6 of the 8 from the C-47 attend his funeral, including both nurses who traveled halfway across the country to pay respects. The moral lesson resonates across generations because it strips away abstractions about rules and focuses on essential questions. What do you do when doing right means breaking every rule? Curdes doesn't claim moral certainty. He doesn't argue his decision created new precedent. He simply states what he believed. 8 Americans were going to die unless someone acted. And he was the only person positioned to act. Louis Curdes shot down 7 German, 1 Italian, 1 Japanese, and 1 American aircraft. He remains the only pilot in history to receive a medal for that last victory. His name appears in no top 10 ace lists. He never wrote memoirs. He refused countless requests to commercialize his story. He believed he'd simply done what any pilot would do. The 8 who survived know better. They know courage isn't following rules when following rules is easy. Courage is breaking rules when that's the only way to do what's right. Sometimes the most heroic thing a warrior can do is turn guns on his own side. Not in treachery, but in salvation. The C-47 was never recovered from waters off Bataan, but the legacy endures in military training programs, legal frameworks for engagement rules, and most importantly, in descendants of 8 people who lived because one pilot had courage to make an impossible choice. That's the story of First Lieutenant Louis Edward Curdes, the ace who shot down the enemy, the POW who escaped, the hero who saved lives by appearing to take them, the man who proved sometimes the rulebook has no answers, and sometimes that's exactly when heroes emerge.